London, May 5th, 1980. For 6 days, the world had watched a hostage crisis unfold inside the Iranian Embassy. Negotiations had stalled, one hostage had already been killed, and everyone feared the next announcement would be even worse. Then, without warning, black-clad soldiers appeared on the roof. Explosions shattered the embassy windows. Thick smoke poured into the streets. Gunfire echoed across central London. Millions of people watched it happen live on television. The assault lasted less than 20 minutes, but those 20 minutes changed something far bigger than a single hostage crisis. They transformed how governments around the world would fight terrorism. Until that day, very few people had even heard of the Special Air Service. After that night, the SAS became a legend. But what most people don't know is that Operation Nimrod almost didn't happen, and even after the assault began, nothing went exactly as planned. This is the story of the night the SAS changed modern counterterrorism. To understand why those explosions echoed across London, we have to go back 6 days, April 30th, 1980. At first, it looked like an ordinary spring morning. People walked to work. Traffic moved through Prince's Gate. Diplomats arrived at the Iranian Embassy. Nothing seemed unusual. Then, everything changed in a matter of seconds. 6 armed men forced their way into the building. Within minutes, they had taken more than 20 people hostage. Police officers rushed to the scene. The streets were sealed, and one of London's most prestigious neighborhoods suddenly became the center of an international crisis. The gunmen belonged to a small separatist group demanding the release of political prisoners held in Iran. If their demands weren't met, they warned, hostages would begin to die. At first, British authorities believed there was still time. Time to negotiate, time to understand exactly who they were dealing with, time to end the crisis peacefully. But inside the embassy, every passing hour made the situation more dangerous. Food was running low. The hostages had no idea whether they would survive, and outside, armed police could do little more than wait, because if negotiations failed, there was only one option left, one that had never been attempted under the eyes of millions watching live television. For the next 6 days, London held its breath. Inside the embassy, every hour felt longer than the last. The hostages were exhausted. No one knew who would be taken next, or whether the men holding them were becoming more desperate or more dangerous. Outside, British police negotiated constantly. Messages were passed back and forth. Deadlines came and went. Sometimes the gunmen released a hostage, just enough to convince everyone that a peaceful solution might still be possible. But each concession came with another demand, and every demand increased the pressure on the British government. Behind closed doors, another team had already begun preparing, not because an assault had been approved, but because they knew it might become necessary at any moment. While negotiators talked, a secret military unit was studying every detail of the building. Blueprints, photographs, window positions, roof access, every possible way in, and every possible way things could go wrong. They even built a full-scale replica of the embassy and rehearsed the assault again and again and again. The goal wasn't simply to enter the building. It was to rescue innocent people inside a maze of narrow rooms without knowing exactly where the terrorists were waiting. And then, on the 6th day, everything changed. One of the hostages was dragged to a window. Moments later, he was executed. The negotiations were over. From that moment on, there was no longer a hostage crisis. There was only one mission left: rescue the survivors. When the order was finally given, most people watching had never even heard the name Special Air Service. The SAS had existed for decades, but unlike conventional military units, they operated almost entirely in the shadows. No public interviews, very few photographs, almost no official information. For years, their missions remained classified. Even many people inside Britain's armed forces knew very little about what they actually did. That secrecy wasn't an accident. It was part of the unit itself. The less people knew, the more effective they could be. By 1980, the SAS had already built a reputation inside military circles for solving problems that conventional forces couldn't. Hostage rescue, counterterrorism, close quarters combat, precision under pressure. But there was one problem. They had never carried out an operation like this in front of millions of people. Every movement, every mistake, every shot fired could be broadcast live across the world. Failure wouldn't simply cost lives. It could destroy the reputation of one of Britain's most secret military units. Inside a nearby military base, the assault team continued rehearsing again and again, every staircase, every hallway, every room, every possible mistake. Because once they entered that building, there would be no second attempt. And then, late in the afternoon of May 5th, the Prime Minister made the decision. The SAS would go in. At exactly 7:23 p.m., the waiting was over. The assault team moved into position. Some operators climbed onto the roof. Others prepared to enter through the rear. Everyone knew their role. Every movement had been rehearsed countless times. Then, the order came. Go! Explosive charges ripped through the embassy windows. Almost instantly, the quiet streets of central London erupted into chaos. Smoke burst from the upper floors, glass rained onto the pavement below, and millions of television viewers suddenly found themselves watching a real counterterrorism operation unfold live. Within seconds, SAS operators were already inside. Their objective wasn't simply to eliminate the terrorists, it was to find the hostages, identify the gunmen, and make life or death decisions. In a building filled with smoke, confusion, and innocent civilians, every room presented a new unknown. Every closed door could hide another hostage or another armed attacker. Then, something unexpected happened. One of the ropes used by the assault team became tangled. An operator was left hanging outside the building, completely exposed. At almost the same moment, one of the explosive charges ignited a fire inside the embassy. Suddenly, the carefully rehearsed assault was unfolding very differently from the plan. Visibility disappeared, smoke filled the corridors, the temperature rose rapidly, radio communication became increasingly difficult, but there was no option to stop, no opportunity to reset. The only way out was forward. Room by room, floor by floor, the SAS pushed deeper into the building. Less than 20 minutes after it had begun, it was over. 5 of the 6 terrorists were dead. 1 was captured alive. 19 hostages walked out of the embassy alive. The operation had succeeded. But what happened inside the building was only part of the story. Outside, television cameras had captured almost everything. The explosions, the smoke, the black-clad soldiers descending from the roof. For millions of people, this was the first time they had ever seen a modern counterterrorism unit in action, and they couldn't look away. Within hours, newspapers around the world carried the same images. The operation dominated television broadcasts, military planners, police commanders, governments. They all studied what had happened in London. Not because the raid had been perfect, it wasn't. Unexpected problems had appeared almost immediately. Equipment failed. A fire broke out during the assault. Some parts of the plan had to be improvised under extreme pressure, but that was exactly what impressed military professionals. Despite the chaos, the team adapted. The mission continued. The hostages were rescued. Around the world, countries began investing in specialized hostage rescue units. Training methods changed. Close quarters battle became a priority. Police tactical teams evolved. Military special operations expanded. The image of highly trained operators moving rapidly through buildings, something that today seems almost familiar, was still new in 1980. Operation Nimrod didn't invent modern counterterrorism, but it showed the world what it could look like. And from that day forward, the letters SAS were no no longer known only inside military circles. They had become part of history. More than 4 decades have passed since Operation Nimrod. The world has changed. Technology has changed. The threats have changed. But one lesson from that night remains just as relevant today. When negotiations fail, someone still has to walk through the door. Operation Nimrod lasted less than 20 minutes, yet its influence can still be seen in almost every modern counterterrorism unit operating today. Some stories change history through years of war, others change it in a single evening, and this was one of them. If you enjoy military stories told through the people, the decisions, and the moments that changed history, consider subscribing because there are many more stories like this, and some of them are even more unbelievable than fiction. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next story.